An elderly billionaire slips on treacherous ice, only to be helped up by a working waitress. She had no idea that this single act of selfless kindness would soon pivot her life onto an entirely new axis. What if one fleeting moment of unexpected compassion truly possessed the power to change two lives forever? On a brutally bitter December morning in downtown Chicago, the wind tore through the canyons of the city streets with a ferocious, cutting fury, forcing even the most seasoned urban dwellers to scramble for any available shelter. The sidewalks were coated in a treacherous sheet of clear ice, a cruel, slick mirror reflecting the oppressive gray sky above. Vincent Ashworth, whose fortune had recently topped $3 billion, emerged from his sleek, black sedan. He was impeccably tailored, wearing a bespoke cashmere coat that cost more than most people's annual budget for rent. At 47, he had forged his vast empire through unrelenting, steel-edged determination and cold, calculated decisions. But none of his legendary foresight could have prepared him for the sudden, humiliating reality of what happened next. One wrong, fractional step on that deceitful pavement sent him sprawling instantly, the impact driving the air from his lungs. His expensive leather briefcase flew from his hand, scattering confidential papers across the frozen ground like dead autumn leaves. As he lay there, momentarily stunned, acutely aware of the sting of embarrassment and wondering if anyone even cared to notice his fall, a soft, gentle voice sliced through the sharp winter air. "Sir, are you hurt?" The voice belonged to a woman who was about to unwittingly turn his meticulously ordered world completely upside down. "Where are you watching from today?" Carmen Rodriguez had been slogging through double shifts at Murphy's Diner for 3 grueling months straight, and this particular Thursday morning felt indistinguishable from the 100 others that had preceded it. At 39, she moved with the practiced, almost mechanical grace of someone who had dedicated 15 years to balancing precarious stacks of plates, dodging harried cooks, and navigating the constant chaos of a commercial kitchen. Her hands were noticeably weathered and calloused, telling unspoken stories of long, physically demanding nights and painfully early mornings. The diner itself sat stoically on the corner of Michigan Avenue, its neon sign flickering weakly, a tired splash of red against the December gloom. It served coffee that was perhaps too strong but comfort food that somehow always managed to make everything a little bit better. She had been methodically refilling the salt shakers when she spotted the distinct figure of a man tumbling through the frost-covered window. Without pausing to think, Carmen snatched her thin coat and rushed outside, her worn work shoes sliding slightly on the very same patch of unforgiving ice that had claimed him. Vincent looked up at her with startled, clear blue eyes. His perfectly styled gray hair, usually immaculate, was now dusted with crystalline snow, and his dignity, that fragile veneer protecting the powerful, was clearly bruised far worse than his body. "Sir, are you hurt?" she repeated, kneeling beside him on the frozen sidewalk. Her voice held an unexpected warmth, a genuine concern that seemed to cut through the bitter cold, replacing the usual polite, wary distance most people maintained around him. "I'm fine," Vincent muttered automatically, though a sharp, insistent throbbing had already begun in his left ankle, and his pride stung even more painfully. He had walked these powerful streets for 20 years, commanding boardrooms and sealing deals worth hundreds of millions. Yet here he was, momentarily as helpless as a child on a perilous sheet of ice. Carmen couldn't buy his tough act for a second. Having successfully raised 2 headstrong teenagers, she could spot a hurt man trying desperately to save face from a mile away. "Let me help you up," she insisted gently, extending her hand toward him. Her fingers were surprisingly warm despite the icy temperature, and calloused from years of honest, relentless labor. Something about the simplicity and sincerity of her touch made Vincent pause, the noise of the city fading slightly. He tried to recall the last time someone had offered him assistance without the unspoken expectation of receiving something substantial in return. He couldn't remember. His own adult children rarely called unless they needed financial help. His ex-wife communicated exclusively through aggressive lawyers, and his employees feared him far too much to show anything resembling genuine personal concern. Vincent accepted her help, surprised by her small but steady strength as she braced and steadied him onto his feet. "There we go," Carmen smiled. It was the kind of honest, unguarded smile that reached her eyes, causing tiny, endearing wrinkles to appear at the corners. You should come inside and sit down for a minute. That was quite a fall. And you're shaking. He instinctively wanted to refuse, to immediately call his driver and vanish back into his climate-controlled, safe world. But something about her gentle, persistent insistence reminded him powerfully of his own grandmother's quiet stubbornness. Inside Murphy's diner, the rich aroma of sizzling bacon and robust coffee wrapped around them like a tangible, warm embrace. The place was decidedly nothing like the Michelin-starred, five-star restaurants Vincent frequented, with its cracked, faded vinyl booths and hopelessly mismatched plates. But it possessed one crucial quality his expensive haunts completely lacked: soul. Carmen guided him carefully to a secluded corner booth and disappeared for only a moment, returning quickly with a steaming mug of coffee and a genuinely concerned expression clouding her face. "I'm Carmen," she said softly, sliding into the seat directly across from him. "And you look like you could use a friendly face." Vincent studied her face intently, searching for the calculating, opportunistic look he had learned to recognize in countless others over the decades. But he found only straightforward, genuine kindness. Her dark hair was neatly pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her uniform, though clean, was visibly worn. It told him everything he needed to know about her difficult circumstances without her uttering a single word about money or struggle. "Vincent," he replied, intentionally leaving off the imposing Ashworth surname for reasons he couldn't quite articulate. Something about this simple place, about her, made him want to exist for a moment as just a man instead of a headline. "Thank you for helping me. Most people would have just walked right past." Carmen let out a quick, bright laugh, a sound like silver bells chiming, that made him realize just how rarely he heard such genuine, unforced laughter in his insulated life. "Where I come from, you don't leave people lying out in the cold," she said simply. "My mama always taught me that kindness doesn't cost anything, but it's ultimately worth everything." As she spoke, Vincent observed the habitual way she absently rubbed her left wrist and noted the tired, deeply etched lines around her eyes, which spoke volumes about someone carrying burdens significantly heavier than mere coffee trays. He found himself developing a genuine, unfamiliar curiosity about her life, a feeling that had been sorely absent from his sterile world for longer than he cared to admit. The coffee was surprisingly excellent, rich, strong, and potent enough to effectively chase away the lingering chill from his fall. As they talked, Vincent learned that Carmen had been working at the diner since her painful divorce 5 years earlier, diligently supporting her 2 children while simultaneously putting herself through nursing school. She spoke of her ambitious dreams with a quiet, fierce determination that resonated, reminding him powerfully of his own younger self, before his massive success had metastasized into isolation and his staggering wealth had erected an impenetrable wall between him and authentic human connection. But as their conversation deepened, Vincent noticed Carmen glancing nervously, repeatedly, at the clock on the wall. Her manager, a heavy-set man with deeply set, permanent scowl lines, had been shooting deeply disapproving looks their way for at least the past 10 minutes. Carmen's break was clearly far over, and Vincent watched the anxiety visibly creeping into her shoulders as she realized she had been away from her assigned tables for too long. "I should probably get back to work," she said reluctantly, standing up and smoothing down her clean uniform. "But are you sure you're completely okay? Maybe you should really see a doctor about that ankle." Vincent nodded, genuinely touched by her continued, persistent concern. But just as she turned to leave, he heard her manager's harsh, guttural voice slice mercilessly through the diner's comfortable chatter. "Rodriguez, what do you think this is, a social club?" The man's words cracked across the restaurant like a sharp, painful slap, and Vincent watched Carmen's cheeks flush deep red with immediate embarrassment as other customers instinctively turned to stare. Something hard, cold, and fiercely protective stirred in Vincent's chest as he witnessed the sudden, deep humiliation in her eyes, and he realized with absolute certainty that this single moment was about to change absolutely everything. The manager's voice boomed across Murphy's diner like thunder just before a massive storm, and Vincent watched Carmen's kind face transform from warm composure to quiet, burning humiliation. You think we pay you to chat up customers instead of doing your actual job? Ray Kowalski had been managing the diner for 8 years, and his notorious approach to employee relations could, at best, be described as brutally militaristic. He stood with his thick arms crossed, his grease-stained apron stretched tightly across his substantial belly, making absolutely certain that everyone in the restaurant could clearly hear his displeasure. "I'm sorry, Ray," Carmen said quietly, her voice barely registering above a whisper. Vincent felt a painful knot twist in his stomach as he watched this good, decent woman apologize merely for showing basic human decency. "This gentleman fell outside, and I was just making sure he was. I don't care if he was bleeding to death," Ray interrupted, his face turning an angry shade of scarlet. "Your job is to serve coffee and clear tables, not play nursemaid to every clumsy stranger who walks in here." The cruel words hit Carmen like actual physical blows, and Vincent could see her shoulders slump slightly under their accumulated weight. All around the diner, other customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, witnessing a spectacle that felt profoundly, fundamentally wrong. Vincent started to rise, his protective instincts flaring hot, but Carmen caught his eye and gave the slightest, most pleading shake of her head. She didn't want him to make things any worse for her, and that small, selfless gesture of self-sacrifice only further fueled his rapidly mounting anger. He had spent his entire adult life in boardrooms where respect was fiercely demanded and reliably given, where people's dignity was protected, even during the most ferocious corporate negotiations. Watching Carmen endure this sudden, petty public humiliation felt like witnessing something inherently sacred being casually trampled underfoot. "Table 6 is still waiting for their eggs," Ray continued, his voice dripping with icy disdain. "And don't think I haven't noticed you talking instead of working. We've had this conversation before, Rodriguez. Maybe it's time to find someone who actually wants to work." The threat hung heavy in the air like acrid smoke, and Vincent saw Carmen's hands tremble visibly as she nodded stiffly and hurried away to tend to her waiting customers. But Vincent's keenly observant eyes caught something that made his heart sink even further. As Carmen rushed to deliver the food to table 6, her nervousness and distraction caused her to bump awkwardly into another waitress, sending a plate of eggs Benedict crashing dramatically to the floor. The ceramic shattered with a loud, sickening sound like breaking dreams, and the sight of the expensive food scattered across the worn linoleum seemed to represent something much larger and more tragic than a simple serving accident. Ray was across the restaurant in mere seconds, his face now a dangerous, furious shade of purple with uncontrollable rage. "That's coming out of your paycheck, Rodriguez," he snarled, loud enough for every single person to hear. $22 for the meal, plus another 10 for the plate. Maybe next time you'll pay attention to where you're going instead of daydreaming. Vincent quickly did the mental math. $32 was probably close to what Carmen made in tips on a truly good day. As Carmen knelt down, her face pale, to meticulously clean up the broken pieces, Vincent noticed tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. But it was what happened next that revealed the true depth of human character in the room. An elderly gentleman at table 6, the one who had ordered the ruined breakfast, slowly stood up and walked over to where Carmen was still diligently picking up the ceramic fragments. "Honey," the old man said gently, his voice soft, "accidents happen to all of us. Don't you worry about my breakfast. I wasn't that hungry anyway." He then quietly placed a crisp $20 bill into Carmen's trembling hand, closing her fingers around it with paternal kindness. "You take care of yourself, you hear?" The gesture was small in monetary terms but profoundly impactful, a powerful reminder that kindness still existed in this world, even when cruelty seemed determined to dominate. Vincent watched this interaction with growing emotion, instantly recognizing something he had long forgotten in his ruthless climb to the top: the profound power of simple human compassion. Here was a man of evidently modest means offering genuine comfort to someone who desperately needed it, expecting absolutely nothing in return. It stood in stark, devastating contrast to Vincent's own transactional world, where every single gesture came with strings attached, and every kindness ultimately had a price tag. As Carmen returned to work with quiet, renewed dignity, Vincent found himself studying the other customers' faces. He saw clear disapproval for Ray's brutal treatment of her, sympathy for her difficult situation, and something else: respect for the composed way she handled herself under overwhelming pressure. These were regular people, probably working multiple difficult jobs themselves, but they recognized inherent quality when they saw it. Carmen possessed something Vincent had been unconsciously searching for without realizing it: authentic grace under fire. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. Here was a woman who had demonstrated more natural leadership and sheer character in one difficult, pressured moment than most of his highly paid, six-figure executives demonstrated in years. She had helped a complete stranger, endured public humiliation with composure, and somehow managed to maintain her essential kindness despite being treated monstrously unfairly. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. But as Vincent sat there, his excellent coffee slowly growing cold and his brilliant mind racing through possibilities, Ray suddenly appeared at his table with a barely concealed, challenging sneer. "Everything all right here, sir? I hope our waitress's unprofessional behavior didn't completely ruin your experience." The challenge in his voice was clear. He expected Vincent either to meekly complain about Carmen or simply to mind his own business and disappear. What Ray Kowalski couldn't possibly have known was that he had just made the biggest, most irreversible mistake of his entire life by fatally underestimating the quiet, contemplative man in the expensive cashmere coat. Vincent looked up slowly at Ray Kowalski with the kind of calm, controlled intensity that had made him legendary and feared in high-stakes business circles. The diner manager, however, was far too blinded by his own towering arrogance to recognize the mortal danger he was truly in. "Actually," Vincent said, his voice deceptively calm and level, "your waitress showed more professionalism in the last 20 minutes than I've witnessed in some boardrooms. She helped someone who was genuinely hurt, demonstrated sincere concern, and handled your public humiliation of her with truly remarkable grace." Ray's sneer faltered slightly, but his massive ego would not permit him to back down. "Listen, mister, I don't know who you think you are, but I run this place, and I decide how my employees should behave. Carmen's been nothing but trouble since the day she started. Always thinking she's too good for this job. Always acting like she knows better than me." The bitter words spilled out like poison, revealing years of deep-seated resentment and a profound insecurity that Vincent instantly recognized. "What I am," Vincent replied, standing up slowly and deliberately, allowing his full, imposing height and presence to fill the space between them, "is someone who knows the difference between real leadership and petty tyranny." His voice remained quiet, yet there was a core of steel underneath the silk that made several nearby customers look up sharply from their meals. "And what I see here is a good woman being punished severely for having a conscience." Ray's face cycled through several frantic shades of red as he slowly realized this was absolutely not going to be the easy intimidation he'd expected. "If you don't like how I run my business, you can take your money somewhere else," he blustered weakly. But Vincent could clearly see the uncertainty and fear creeping into his eyes. Something about the stranger's quiet confidence was deeply unsettling, like facing down a high-level predator that was, for the moment, simply choosing to be merciful. From across the restaurant, Carmen watched the confrontation with growing, terrified alarm. She had seen Ray systematically destroy employees before, utilizing his small position of power to cruelly crush anyone who dared to challenge him. Her last job had ended exactly the same way, standing up to an abusive manager who forced her to choose between her fundamental dignity and her much-needed paycheck. She simply couldn't afford to lose this job, not with 2 teenagers depending on her and nursing school tuition bills due the following month. "Please," she whispered to Vincent as she cautiously approached their table, her voice thick with raw emotion, "don't make this worse for me. I need this job." The stark desperation in her eyes hit Vincent like a physical blow, painfully reminding him of how much was truly at stake for people who did not have the luxury of financial security. In his world, effortlessly walking away from a bad situation was always an option. In hers, it could easily mean homelessness. But Vincent had already made his final decision, and 25 years of flawless business instincts told him that this was a defining moment that would shape more than just one difficult Thursday morning. He reached deliberately into his jacket and pulled out his heavy business card, holding it just barely out of Ray's grasp. "Carmen, would you mind getting me a pen?" he asked gently. As she hurried away, Vincent turned his focused attention back to Ray with the intense concentration of a man who had just decided, irrevocably, to change someone's life. "I want you to understand," Vincent said quietly, his voice low and firm, "that what happens next is entirely your choice." Ray instinctively grabbed for the business card, and Vincent watched his face undergo a horrifying transformation as he read the embossed name. Vincent Ashworth, Chairman and CEO, Ashworth Industries. The color instantly drained from Ray's cheeks as the terrifying implications instantly sank in. Vincent Ashworth was Chicago royalty, a man whose international company employed thousands, and whose charitable foundation had financed half the city's major development projects. "Mr. Ashworth," Ray stammered, his bravado crumbling like a poorly built house of cards. I had no idea. I mean, if I'd only known who you were." But Vincent held up a commanding hand, cutting off the groveling and excuses before they could even begin. "The fact that you didn't know who I was is exactly the point," Vincent said, his eyes drilling into the manager's. "You treated me with basic courtesy because you thought I might be important, but you treated Carmen with calculated cruelty because you wrongly assumed she wasn't." When Carmen returned with the pen, Vincent took it and wrote something brief and precise on the back of his business card before handing it directly to her. Carmen's hand shook visibly as she read what he had written. "Call me tomorrow at 10 a.m. I have a proposition for you." Below that was a private phone number she suspected very few people in all of Chicago possessed. "Mr. Ashworth, I don't understand," she whispered, looking frantically between the card and his kind but resolute face. "You will," Vincent promised. Then he turned his attention back to Ray one final, chilling time. "I own the building this diner operates in," he stated matter-of-factly. "Have owned it for 12 years, actually. My property management company usually handles the tenancy details, so I rarely get involved in tenant issues. But I'm getting involved now." Ray's face had gone completely white, and Vincent could clearly see him frantically calculating the crushing cost of his arrogance. "Carmen's shift ends in 2 hours," Vincent continued, the quiet authority in his voice absolute. "Until then, she will be treated with the respect she has more than earned through her kindness and professionalism. After that, well..." He let the sentence hang, unfinished, knowing that Ray's now panicked imagination would fill in the blanks far more effectively than any direct threat he could voice. As Vincent prepared to finally leave, he noticed that the entire diner had fallen into a heavy silence, every customer and employee witnessing this unexpected, dramatic reversal of fortune. Carmen stood still, holding his business card like it was made of spun gold. Tears finally began spilling down her cheeks as the magnitude of what had just happened began to truly sink in. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. Sometimes life presents you with moments that demand immediate action. Vincent thought to himself, remembering his own difficult early struggles and the vital people who had helped him when he needed it most. Moments when staying silent felt tantamount to complicity with cruelty. But as he walked decisively toward the door, Vincent heard Ray's voice one more time, pitched low and intensely venomous. "Don't think this is over, Rodriguez. Rich people come and go, but you still have to work in this neighborhood." The threat was clear, immediate, and terrifying, and Vincent realized that protecting Carmen was going to require far more than just one dramatic, public gesture. Ray Kowalski was exactly the kind of man who would nurse his humiliation and look for bitter revenge, which meant Vincent's intervention had just painted an enormous target squarely on Carmen's back. Vincent stopped abruptly halfway to the door, Ray's whispered threat echoing in his ears like a bell that could never be unrung. In that moment, he faced a defining choice that would ultimately determine not just Carmen's immediate future, but his own understanding of what real power was truly meant to accomplish. He could walk away, satisfied that he had made his point and given Carmen his card, trusting that she would call him tomorrow, or he could decisively finish what he had started and guarantee, permanently, that Ray Kowalski would never again be in a position to destroy the lives of good, struggling people. He turned around and walked deliberately back to Ray, his decision crystallizing with cold clarity with each step. The entire diner held its breath as Vincent approached the terrified manager with the slow, deliberate pace of a man who had just realized exactly what needed to happen. "Ray," he said quietly, his voice carrying the inherent authority of someone accustomed to being instantly obeyed. "I'd like to speak with you privately in your office, now." Ray's face had progressed beyond pale into a grayish, sickly color that suggested he might faint. "Mr. Ashworth, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding," but Vincent's icy expression cut him off mid-sentence. Without another word, Ray led the way, his steps uncertain and shuffling, to a cramped, messy office located behind the suffocating heat of the kitchen. "Sit down," Vincent commanded. Ray Kowalski immediately collapsed into his desk chair like a marionette whose strings had been abruptly severed. Vincent remained standing, deliberately using every inch of his height to utterly dominate the small, suffocating space. "I've been thinking about what you just said to Carmen," Vincent began, his tone almost conversational, "and I realized that my original approach was entirely too subtle." Vincent pulled out his sleek phone and speed-dialed a number Ray couldn't possibly see. "Patricia, it's Vincent. I need you to immediately prepare the termination paperwork for the Murphy's Diner lease agreement." "Yes, the one on Michigan Avenue. Effective immediately." Ray's eyes went wide with pure, unadulterated panic as he listened only to Vincent's side of the cold, clinical conversation. Wait. Ray gasped, jumping desperately to his feet. "Mr. Ashworth, please. You can't do this. I have a family. A mortgage. This diner is my life." The desperation in his voice was real now. Raw, sudden, and unfiltered. But Vincent felt no flicker of sympathy for a man who had shown none. To others, the way you've been treating Carmen suggests a profound, willful lack of understanding about what it means for a person to depend on a job for their family's survival. Vincent replied, his voice dangerously low. "Perhaps experiencing that vulnerability yourself, Ray, will finally give you some much-needed perspective." But as he watched Ray Kowalski physically shrink, his shoulders collapsing under the weight of his fear and shame, Vincent realized that completely destroying this one man's life wouldn't, in fact, solve the larger systemic problem of corporate callousness. He softened his immediate plan. "However, I am not finished," Vincent continued, ending the call with his lawyer and sliding his phone into his jacket pocket. "I believe in second chances, a measure of mercy, incidentally, that far exceeds anything you've ever shown your employees. Here is precisely what is going to happen." Ray Kowalski clung to Vincent's every word, gasping for them like a drowning man desperately grasping for a life preserver. "Carmen Rodriguez is going to finish her shift today with the dignity and respect she deserves. Tomorrow, she is starting a new, far better job with my company, Ashworth Industries. And you, Ray, are going to use this humiliating experience to fundamentally transform yourself into the kind of manager who treats the people who work for him like valuable human beings, not disposable commodities." Vincent leaned forward across the worn desk, his eyes intensely focused, boring deep into Ray's soul. "I'm not terminating your lease today. You get to keep your diner for now. But I want you to understand something very clearly, Ray. I will be checking on this establishment regularly and without warning. If I hear even a whisper that you are mistreating employees, if you create or tolerate a hostile work environment, if you so much as raise your voice inappropriately to anyone who works here, I will not only permanently close this diner down, but I will personally ensure that every single restaurant owner in Chicago knows exactly why. You will be blackballed from this city's hospitality industry forever." Ray Kowalski nodded frantically, his face glistening with panic and tears streaming unchecked down his cheeks. "Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Ashworth. I understand completely," he choked out, his voice thin and broken. Vincent studied the man for a long, quiet moment, searching for any flicker of residual bitterness or spite that might lead to future retaliation. But he saw only a truly broken man, a petty tyrant who had just learned a brutal, crucial lesson about power and consequences. When they finally emerged from the cramped, stifling office, The diner was still unnaturally quiet, the background hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. Every eye, from the cooks behind the counter to the few remaining customers, followed their movements. Vincent walked directly to Carmen's station, where she stood motionless, a coffee pot frozen halfway through a pour. She had clearly heard the raised voices of Ray from the office, but the meaning of the muffled confrontation remained uncertain. "Carmen," Vincent said gently, his voice now a stark, velvet contrast to the steel-edged authority he'd shown moments before. "Would you mind walking me to the door?" As they moved slowly toward the entrance, the distance creating a private bubble around them, he spoke quietly, intended only for her ears. "Ray has agreed, under duress, to treat all employees with proper respect going forward. You'll finish your shift without any further problems." A fragile hope mixed with profound confusion crossed her face. "But what about tomorrow?" Carmen asked, her voice still shaky, afraid to believe. "What did you write on your card, Mr. Ashworth? I don't understand what is happening right now." Vincent smiled down at her, the first genuinely relaxed smile he had allowed himself to wear in months. It was wide, transformative, and utterly sincere. "Tomorrow," Vincent said, pushing open the heavy diner door to the crisp, freezing air outside, "your real life begins." As he stepped onto the slick, icy sidewalk where their unlikely journey had begun less than an hour ago, Vincent realized with a jolt that Carmen wasn't the only one whose life was about to be changed forever. His own carefully constructed emotional walls were beginning to crack. The next morning arrived bathed in the sharp, crystalline light of a perfect Chicago December. The city skyline sparkled, the towering glass structures reflecting the sun like polished jewels. And beneath those glittering heights, Carmen Rodriguez stood outside the colossal, imposing glass monument that housed the global headquarters of Ashworth Industries. She clutched Vincent's business card, heavy, embossed, and real, in her trembling hand like a sacred talisman. She had barely slept, her mind a frantic mix of dizzying possibility and paralyzing fear. Her 16-year-old daughter, Sophia, had helped her select her best, most professional outfit. A simple, well-maintained black dress that Carmen had worn for her high school graduation years ago. Meanwhile, her 14-year-old son, Summerale, had insisted on walking her all the way to the train station for luck. "You've got this, Mom," Sophia had whispered fiercely as Carmen left their small, cramped apartment. Those simple words echoed in her heart like a drumbeat of determination as she rode the express elevator, ascending rapidly to the 42nd floor. Her reflection multiplied infinitely in the polished steel walls of the cabin, each image showing a woman who had, until yesterday, entirely forgotten how to believe in her own potential. Vincent Ashworth was waiting for her in his corner office. It was a staggering space, easily large enough to house 3 apartments the size of Carmen's entire home. Yet, somehow, the room felt warm and inviting, rather than intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking, panoramic view of Lake Michigan, shimmering turquoise under the winter sky. Carmen noticed small, humanizing details. His massive, imported wood desk held not only stacks of business awards but also several framed family photos. "Carmen," Vincent said, rising smoothly from behind his desk with a warmth that felt entirely genuine. "Thank you for making the time to come in. Please sit down." He gestured toward 2 deeply comfortable leather chairs arranged near the stunning windows, deliberately choosing to join her there instead of maintaining the formal, guarded distance of the desk. "I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of having my assistant research some preliminary information about you." Carmen's heart fluttered violently with sudden anxiety. She instinctively braced herself for judgment. "Sir, if this is about my credit history or my divorce, I understand." But Vincent held up a gentle, reassuring hand, his expression calm. "It's about your nursing school transcripts," he said with a relaxed smile. "A perfect academic record of 4.0 GPA, achieved while working full-time and raising 2 children as a single mother. Your professors describe you as dedicated, compassionate, and a natural leader. Tell me, Carmen, what made you choose nursing in the first place?" As she spoke about the profound dream of helping people heal, of restoring human dignity through care, Vincent heard clear echoes of his younger, more idealistic self. The man he was before massive success and corporate maneuvering had complicated his original motivations. "I have a significant proposition for you," Vincent continued, his tone shifting back to focused professionalism. Ashworth Industries is currently launching a brand new division, specifically focused on healthcare consulting and comprehensive employee wellness programs for our clients. We need someone exceptional to head the program development. Someone who deeply understands both the business side of healthcare and the crucial human side of compassion. He laid out the details. The position requires the completion of your nursing degree, which the company will fully fund and support. It will involve designing sophisticated, holistic wellness programs for all of our employees and client companies across the nation. Carmen stared at him, certainty flooding her that she must have fundamentally misheard or misunderstood the scope of the offer. "Mr. Ashworth, I'm just a waitress. I don't have formal business experience or management training. Why would you offer someone like me, with my background, such an extraordinary opportunity?" Her question carried the profound, heavy weight of years of silent self-doubt, of being told, subtly and overtly, that she wasn't good enough, smart enough, or worthy of anything beyond serving coffee and clearing plates. "Because," Vincent said quietly, leaning forward with an intense focus that demanded her attention, "yesterday you showed me something I had completely forgotten even existed in the upper echelons of the business world. You showed me genuine leadership, the kind that flows from deep character rather than conferred position." He ticked off her qualities on his fingers. "When you helped a stranger without expecting anything in return, when you maintained your dignity and composure despite being publicly humiliated, when you put my well-being above your own job security, you demonstrated the exact, non-negotiable qualities I need to build this new division." Vincent stood and walked to his massive desk, returning with a polished folder that contained more hope than Carmen could have ever imagined. The starting salary is $68,000 annually, with full health and dental benefits, complete education assistance, and a significant signing bonus to help you with any immediate financial needs. There is also a company car included, as you will be traveling between our various facilities, and comprehensive, personalized training to help you transition seamlessly into this new role. Carmen's hands trembled violently as she tentatively opened the folder, her eyes scanning the figures. She saw not just financial security, but dignity, empowerment, and a concrete chance to finally stop surviving and actually start thriving. "Mr. Ashworth, this is too much. I truly can't accept charity." Vincent interrupted her with a gentle, sincere laugh. "Carmen, this is not charity. This is a strategic investment in someone who has already unequivocally proven her immense worth. Yesterday, when you helped me up from that icy sidewalk, you reminded me why I built this company in the first place. To create opportunities for good people to do meaningful work that impacts the world positively. I am not giving you a handout. I am offering you a partnership in building something that will help thousands of people live healthier, happier, more balanced lives." 3 months later, Carmen Rodriguez walked through the brightly lit, modern halls of Ashworth Industries. She wore a tailored business suit that fit perfectly and carried a quiet confidence that radiated from deep within her core. Her employee wellness program, which she had named the Dignity Initiative, had already been successfully implemented in 5 major client companies, reporting a measurable reduction in employee sick days by 30% and boosting overall employee satisfaction scores by nearly 40%. At home, life was equally transformed. Sophia had joined the competitive school debate team and was excitedly talking about applying to pre-med programs. Summerale had discovered a serious talent for computer programming, enrolling in advanced coding classes. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in Vincent himself. Their weekly strategy meetings had evolved seamlessly into a genuine, respectful friendship. Carmen's perspective on the vital importance of balancing profit with genuine purpose had begun to influence every major decision his company made. She had reminded him that tremendous business success meant nothing if it came at the unnecessary cost of human dignity. He, in turn, had discovered that the most profoundly profitable investments were often made in good people, rather than simply in new products or technology. On the 1-year anniversary of their first, fateful meeting, Vincent and Carmen returned together to Murphy's Diner. Ray Kowalski, noticeably calmer and perhaps a little thinner, greeted them immediately with nervous respect and, surprisingly, what appeared to be genuine gratitude. The forced changes in his management style had, over time, transformed the restaurant's culture. Employee turnover had dropped to nearly zero, and the atmosphere felt relaxed and productive. Sometimes, Carmen often thought, as she watched lives change through their wellness programs, the most profound and far-reaching transformations came not from grand corporate schemes, but from the simplest, purest act of kindness. She had learned that every single person deserved the chance to discover their own true worth, just as a stranger's momentary kindness had helped her to discover hers on that one icy December morning when everything, absolutely everything, changed forever.